Hey guys, it's Penelope in London, and I'm going to read today part of this book. This is also part volume 9, and the other part, volume 9 of Carl Gustav Jung, is the archetypes and the collective unconscious. So what I'm going to do is read part 3, and part 1 was the ego, which was chapter 1. Chapter 2 is the shadow, and this is chapter 3, and this is 10 pages long, so I'm probably going to do maybe half of this today, and then I'm going to also tie in why this links in for me with astrology, because astrology is symbolism and it explains the archetypes as well. Astrology, as we look at it, it's part in to do with the archetypes. Also, the idea that Jung was talking about on the Anima and the Animus is really important for this point in time in history, that we understand this as human beings. And the ego was greatly misunderstood in terms of spirituality. A lot of people will use the term to get rid of the ego, whereas indeed, the truth is that we have different parts inside of us which form our ego and form our personality. So for instance, you'll have maybe a parent, a good parent inside your psyche, and you'll have, a parent that's not so kind to you. You'll have different people. We have different people living in our heads, and that forms part of the ego. And then we have the collective unconscious as well, which also forms part of the ego. And then we have our early imprints and our upbringing. And we have the super ego, which is the parental voice. We have healthy ego and we have unhealthy ego. So there's a lot more going on with the ego than we bring into light. Jung is bringing to light with his work, and we can learn a lot from reading his work. So I highly recommend you get this book. You can get a PDF copy if you Google of this book also, which might be useful to you for research, but it's beautiful to have the book because it's beautiful quality. And I'm going to read a bit of the Anima and the Animus and tie in the understanding with astrology, and maybe do a part 2 of this video too. So getting on with this, what then is the projection making factor? The East calls it the spinning woman, Maya, who creates illusion by her dancing. Had we not long since known it was from the symbolism of dreams, this hint from the Orient would put us on the right track. The enveloping, embracing, and devouring elements point unmistakably to the mother, that is, to the son's relation to the real mother, to her imago, and to the woman who is to become a mother for him. His eros is a passive like a child's. He hopes to be caught, sucked in, enveloped, and devoured. He seeks, as it were, the protecting, nourishing charm circle of the mother, the condition of the infant released from every care in which the outside world bends over him and even forces happiness upon him. No wonder the real world vanishes from sight. If this situation is dramatized, as the unconscious usually dramatizes it, then there appears before you on the psychological stage a man living regressively, seeking his childhood and his mother, fleeing from a cold, cruel world which denies him understanding. Often a mother appears beside him who apparently shows not the slightest concern that her little son should become a man, but who, with tireless and self-immolating effort, neglects nothing that might hinder him from growing up and marrying. You behold the secret conspiracy between mother and son, and how each helps the other to betray life. Where does the guilt lie? With the mother or with the son? Probably with both. The unsatisfied longing of the son for life and the world ought to be taken seriously. There is in him a desire to touch reality, to embrace the earth and fructity, the field of the world. But he makes no more than a series of fitful starts, for his initiative as well as his staying power are crippled by the secret memory of the world, and happiness may be had as a gift from the mother. The fragment of the world which he, like every man, must encounter again and again is never quite the right one, since it does not fall into his lap, does not meet him halfway, but remains resistant, has to be conquered, and submits only to force. It makes demands on the masculinity of a man, on his ardor, above all on his courage and resolution when it comes throwing his whole being into the scales. For this he would need a faithless Eros, one capable of forgetting his mother and undergoing the pain of relinquishing the first love of his life. The mother, foreseeing this danger, has carefully inculcated into him the virtues of faithfulness, devotion, loyalty, so as to protect him from the moral disruption which he is the risk of every life adventure. He has learned these lessons only too well and remains true to his mother. This naturally causes her the deepest anxiety when, to her greater glory, he turns out to be a homosexual, for example, and at the same time affords her an unconscious satisfaction that is positively mythological. For in the relationship now realigning between them, there is a consummated and immemorable and most sacred archetype of the marriage of mother and son. What, after all, has commonplace reality to offer, with its registry office, pay envelopes, and monthly rent, that could outweigh the mystic awe of the Hieros Gamos, or the star-crowned woman whom the dragon pursues, or the pious obscurities veiling the marriage of the Lamb? This myth, better than any other, illustrates the nature of the collective unconscious. At this level, the mother is both old and young, Demeter and Persephone, and the son is spouse and sleeping suckling rolled into one. The imperfections of real life, with its laborious adaptations and manifold disappointments, naturally cannot compete with such a state of indescribable fulfillment. In the case of the son, the projection-making factor is identical with the mother imago, and this is consequently taken to be the real mother. The projection can only be dissolved when the son sees that in the realm of the psyche there is an imago, not only of the mother, but of the daughter, the sister, the beloved, the heavenly goddess, the chthonic Baob. He's pronounced that Boubo, by the way. And then I go on. Every mother and her beloved is forced to become the carrier and embodiment of the omnipresent and ageless image, which corresponds to the deepest reality in a man. It belongs to him, this perilous image of woman. She stands for the loyalty which, in the interests of life, he must sometimes forgo. She is the much needed compensation for the risks and struggles and sacrifices that all end in disappointment. She is the solace for all the bitterness of life, and at the same time she is the greatest illusionist, the seductress who draws him into life with Maya, and not only into life's reasonable and useful aspects, but also into frightful paradoxes and ambivalences where good and evil, success and ruin, hope and despair counterbalance one another, because she is the greatest danger. She demands from the man his greatest, and if he has it in him, she will receive it. This image is my lady soul, a Spitler called her. I have suggested instead the term anima, as indicating something specific for which the expression soul is too general and too vague. The empirical reality summed up under the concept of the anima forms an extremely dramatic content of the unconscious. It is possible to describe this content in rational scientific language, but in this way one entirely fails to express its living character. Therefore, in describing the living process of the psyche, I deliberately and consciously give preference to the dramatic mythological way of thinking and speaking, because this is not only more expressive, but also more exact than an abstract scientific terminology, which is wont to toy with the notion that its theoretic formulations may one fine day be resolved into algebraic equations. The projection-making factor is the anima, or rather the unconscious, as represented by the anima. Whenever she appears in dreams, visions, and fantasies, she takes on the personified form, thus demonstrating that the factor she embodies possesses all the outstanding characteristics of a feminine being. She is not an invitation of the conscious, but a spontaneous product of the unconscious, nor is she a substitute figure for the mother. On the contrary, there is every likelihood that the numinous qualities which make the mother imago so dangerously powerful derive from the collective archetype of the anima, which is incarnated anew in every male child. Since the anima is an archetype that is found in men, it is responsible to suppose that an equivalent archetype must be present in women. For just as the man is compensated by a feminine element, so woman is compensated by a masculine one. I do not, however, wish this argument to give the impression that these compensatory relationships were arrived at by deduction. On the contrary, long and varied experience was needed in order to grasp the nature of the anima and the animus empirically. Whatever we have to say about these archetypes, therefore, is either directly verifiable or at least rendered probable by the facts. At the same time, I am fully aware that we are discussing pioneer work, which by its very nature can only be provisional. Just as the mother seems to be the first carrier of the projection-making factor for the son, so is the father for the daughter. Practical experience of these relationships is made up of many individual cases presenting all kinds of variations on the same basic theme. A concise description of them can be therefore be no more than schematic. Woman is compensated by the masculine element, and therefore her unconscious has to speak a masculine imprint. This results in a considerable psychological difference between men and women, and accordingly I have called the projection-making factor in women the animus, which means mind or spirit. The animus corresponds to the parental logos, just as the anima corresponds to the maternal eros, but I do not wish to or intend to give these two intuitive concepts too specific a definition. I use eros and logos merely as conceptual aids to describe the fact that woman's consciousness is characterized more by the connective quality of eros than by the discrimination and cognition associated with logos. In men, eros, the function of relationship, is usually less developed than logos. In the women, on the other hand, eros is an expression of their true nature, while their logos is only a regrettable accident. It gives rise to misunderstandings and annoying interpretations in the family circle and among friends. This is because it consists of opinions instead of reflections, and by opinions I mean a priori assumptions that lay claim to absolute truth. Such assumptions, as everyone knows, can be extremely irritating. As the animus is partial to argument, he can best be seen at work in disputes where both parties know they are right. Men can argue in a very womanish way too, when they are anima possessed and have thus been transformed into the animus of their own anima. When with them, the question becomes one of the personal vanity and touchiness, as if they were females. With women, it is a question of power, whether of truth or justice or some other ism. For the dressmaker and hairdresser have already taken care of their vanity. The father, i.e., the sum of conventional opinions, always plays a great role in the feminine-female argumentation. No matter how friendly and obliging a woman's eros may be, no logic on earth can shake her if she is ridden by the animus. Often the man has the feeling, and he is not altogether wrong, that only seduction or beating or rape would have the necessary power of persuasion. He is unaware that this highly dramatic situation would instantly come to banal and unexciting end if he were to quit the field and let a second woman carry on the battle. His wife, for instance, if she herself is not the fiery warhorse, this sound idea seldom or never occurs to him, because no man can converse with the animus for 5 minutes without becoming the victim of his own anima. Anyone who still had enough sense of humor to listen objectively to the ensuing dialogue would be staggered by the vast number of commonplaces, misapplied truisms, cliches from newspapers and novels, shop-soiled platitudes of every description interspersed with vulgar abuse and brain-splitting lack of logic. It is a dialogue which is irrespective of its participants. It is repeated by millions and millions of times in all of the languages of the world, and always remains essentially the same. This singular fact is due to the following circumstance. When animus and anima meet, the animus draws his sword of power, and the Anima ejects her poison of illusion and seduction. The outcome need not always be negative, since the two are equally likely to fall in love, a special instance of love at first sight. The language of love is of astonishing uniformity, using the well-worn formulas with the utmost devotion and fidelity, so that once again the two partners find themselves in a banal collective situation, yet they live in the illusion that they are related to one another in the most individual way. In both its positive and its negative aspects, the Anima and Animus relationship is always full of animosity. It is emotional and hence collective. Effects lower the level of the relationship and bring it closer to the common instinctual basis, which no longer has anything individual about it. Very often the relationship runs its course, heedless of its human performers, who afterwards do not know what happened to them. So what I'm going to do now is, let me just see, I've read 5 pages, so I've got another 5 to go, so I'll make that a second video. And what I'm going to do now is, and I'll do that second video tomorrow, so you continue with this chapter. I'm going to now do a new share, and I'm going to bring up a chart for you to look at with me. So you can see this chart, and this is my natal chart, but I'm going to bring up, I'm going to show you, this is my natal chart with my planets. And if you have your time of birth, if you go to AstroSeek and you have your time of birth, is really important with astrology, because we have the rising sign, which changes every 2 hours. And it's to do with the ecliptic and the way the planets move. So I'm 27 degrees Scorpio. So these archetypes that we're talking about, the Anima and the Animus, they show up in our chart. You know, we look at the shadow, that we can relate that to Lilith. So, you know, the ego would be related in part to the moon. The unconscious would, you know, also the south node of the moon and the north node of the moon. And there's so much of Jung's work in astrology. He actually started using astrology in 1911 when he was age 36. So going back to this, I found a lovely piece which I will, that came to my attention, because I was thinking what planets would be the Anima and the Animus. So basically, if we look at the sun and the moon, so my sun is on my DC and in my 7th house in Gemini, and my moon is also in Gemini. Now, the moon moves 2.5 days through a sign, so your moon will move quite quickly, 2.5 days. So if you were born at the beginning of the day, it's going to be at 1 degree, and then towards the end of the day, it's going to make a big jump. So this is why, another reason, time of birth is really important, because then also you get to know whether your planets fall based on your rising sign. So time of birth. But by meeting the sun, by the meeting of the sun and the moon, 2 big life polarities meet and match, light and darkness. So yes, the moon is, you know, can go to the darkness. It does shed some light in the dark night sky, but the sun is our light. So the light and darkness, unconscious and conscious, and the Anima and the Animus in union terms join to complement each other. So, you know, the moon. And then what I want to tell you then is just to give you a bit more information, is that the sign of Cancer has the ego, the womb, and the childhood environment, children, home, roots, security, protection, mother, family, the clan, ancestors. It's also the nurturing, the inner protection. It's the neglect, the helpless needs, helpless and needs. And then we got the emotions. We have the self-image. It's where we're touchy, subjective, gender roles, and the housewife, house husband. So that would be in astrology, that's partly the understanding of the moon, which holds the 4th house and the sign of Cancer, and it was also to do with our ego. Now the sun in astrology would be it rules Leo. So the moon rules the sign of the moon is the ruler of Cancer, and the sun is ruled by Leo. And the Leo, in keywords, if we look at this, is, you know, it's where creative self-actualization, it's grandiosity, it's our subjective awareness, the ruler, the king, the queen, it's artist, power, arts, it's drama, it's integration, purpose, where we can be full of self. It's where we're approval, exhibitionism, applause, involvement, inflation, positive, negative, the artist. It's being noticed, special recognition, fame, romance, creativity, the child prodigy, the artist, the gambler, the actress, the actor, the risk taker, affairs, adultery, the mistress, children, and the inner child. So we can see here that, you know, if we then put this, you know, and Jung clearly knew what he was doing when he was using astrology. And as an evolutionary astrologer, in part of the work that I do with also helping people with their early imprints and complex PTSD, childhood trauma, I encourage people with this work to understand it, because it helps us to evolve. It's not easy for us being human to grasp all of these concepts, because generally it's not just the written word, it's taking it in and it's digesting it, and integrating it is the hardest thing. It's one thing to read Jung or to look at astrology, but to integrate it into our life is another thing. So that's it. I'm going to leave it there. And if you want to book a session with me, please do, because I'll be able to talk you through your chart and give you some guidance on the transits, which means where the planets are today. I'll just show you, I'll go to my transits here. And what you can see is you can see my inner chart and you can see the transit. So where my sun is right now, transiting, and where the moon is right now for me on my chart too. So this is beautiful stuff. So thanks for watching, and any comments, leave them below, and please subscribe if you have not already. Thanks for watching.